Well, hello, friends. Welcome to the Campfire. Get yourself seated. We're going to tell some story tonight. We always do. This is the Coyote. It's a story we've been reading for a while now. It's getting good. It's about a guy that, well, read back into the story. There's more episodes of it here on the channel. And now we're on to chapter 19, so get yourself seated in, get yourself something nice to drink, and maybe some popcorn or something. Let's tell this story. Chapter 19, Quick Turns. As he rode westward along the road at a swinging lope, Rathburn made no apparent effort to conceal his movements. The night sky was bright with stars, and although the moon was not up, the road was clearly outlined through the matching stands of timber as he swung upwards, past the cabin where he'd met that girl said to be Carlyle's sister. Rathburn could not forget the look on the girl's face when she had asked him about the activities of the officer in the automobile, nor could he forget the expression in her eyes during her altercation with Carlyle earlier that day. After he'd passed the cabin, Rathburn checked his pace and proceeded more slowly up the long stretches of road to the hogback. And once on the hogback, he began to take advantage of the screen of timber on the lower side of the road and to ride more cautiously. However, to anyone who might have been watching, his movements still would have been easily discernible, and it would have appeared that he wasn't quite sure of himself. Twice he turned off at what he appeared to think was the beginning of a trail, and both times he again turned back to the road. Then, as he reached the south end of the hogback where the trail led the road and cut straight across to the mine, two horsemen broke from the timber, and Rathburn reined in his horse as the guns which covered him glinted. The taller of the pair of night riders kept him covered with two guns, while the other rode in close and jerked the weapon from his holster. "Come on with the package," said the man in a hoarse voice. "We won't take a chance on you. If you make any kind of a break, you'll get it where it'll do the most good." And there was a sneering inflection in the voice. Rathburn's hand, as it moved downwards toward his shirt, hovered an instant above where his good gun was stuck in his waistband, out of sight under the skirt of his coat. Then it moved to the open shirt at his throat. He drew out the package and held it out towards the other. The man closed in and snatched the package, glancing at it in the dim starlight. "Now back the way you came and don't invite no shooting," was the brief command. Rathburn whirled his horse and drove in his spurs, and as he fled from the scene, a harsh laugh came to his ears from behind. Then utter silence, save for the pounding of his horse's hooves on the hard road back down the hogback. "Jog along, hoss," Rathburn crooned as he sped down the long slopes towards town. "Maybe we're pegging things wrong, and if it turns out that way, we've a powerful long ways to go." It lacked a few minutes of being 2 hours after midnight when he reached the Carlyle cabin, and there he reined in his horse, dismounted in the shadow of the timber, and crept to a window. The moon had risen and was bathing the hills in a ghostly light, in which every object stood out clear-cut and easily distinguishable. Rathburn peered into the two front windows, but he could see nothing. Then, from a side window into which the moonlight filtered, he made out a bedroom. It was not occupied, and from the other side of the cabin he saw another bedroom, and it, too, was unoccupied. "Nobody home," he muttered cheerfully as he ran for his horse. In another minute he was again speeding down the road towards town. He slackened his pace as he reached the upper end of the short main street. The street was dark, save for two beams of yellow light, one of which shone from a window of the jail office and the other from the front of the Red Feather Resort. He walked his horse down the street past the jail and the resort and almost to the end of the line of buildings, where he arrived before the small one-story, two-room structure which was Sawtey's office and abode. The place was dark. Rathburn dismounted and led his horse into the dark shadow along the side of the little building. Then he went around to the front and drawing his gun from his waistband, he rapped smartly on the door with its butt and dropped it into his holster. There was no movement within, and Rathburn rapped again and tried the door. It was locked. A match flared into flame somewhere beyond the front room, and a glow of light followed. Rathburn, looking through the front window, saw a door wide open and made out the forms of Sati as the mines manager came forward to the front door. "Who is it?" Sati called cautiously. "It's Rathburn." After a moment, a key turned in the lock and the door opened part way, and Rathburn pushed his way in. Why didn't you go?" asked Sati in excited tones. "Lock the door and come in the other room," whispered Rathburn. "I've got something to tell you that'll knock you for a goal." Sati hurriedly locked the door, and as he turned to lead the way into the other room, Rathburn deftly extracted the key. In the light from the lamp in the bedroom, Sati swung on his visitor and looked at him keenly. The mines manager was fully dressed, and the bed was made. It was evident that he had merely dozed on top of the covers with his clothes on. These things Rathburn noted, even as Sati surveyed him with a frown. "Well, what is it?" snapped out Sati. Rathburn blinked in the light. I was held up," he said sheepishly. The mines manager just stared. First he stared into Rathburn's eyes, and then he glanced to the gun in the holster on his thigh. "Couldn't have been very much afraid of you," he said sneeringly. "I see they didn't even take your gun." "It all come from my not knowing enough about the trails, I guess," Rathburn explained lamely. "Got me on the far end of the hogback. 2 of 'em. Had their guns in my face before I knew it. Couldn't have draw if I wanted to. They'd have shot me out of the saddle in a wink. All I could do was hand over the package and beat it." "And they said you were a gunman," said Sati in derision. "How do I know anybody stopped you and robbed you? Maybe you've come back here with that story to cover up the theft of the money. I guess I made a mistake in ever thinking of trusting a man of your caliber." "Yeah, I was afraid of that," said Rathburn. "I was afraid if anything like this was to happen, you might think I was lying and taking the money myself. But I fooled 'em, Mr. Sati," he finished in triumph. "What's that?" Sati asked him sharply. "Look here," cried Rathburn excitedly as he took off his hat and recovered the package he had put in it before starting towards the mine. He held up the package. "I was scared they might get wise and get the drop on me," he said, "so I opened the package and took out what was in it and put it in my hat. So they got the original package all right, but it was stuffed with an old glove of mine. Now here's the money. I didn't go right on to the mine for fear they'd find out their mistake and pot me from the timber. Now this is the money you gave me, minus the seals and the string and the box. I wanted you to see that I was on the square." Sati's eyes were bulging. "Give me that," he gulped out. "Why? Don't you want me to take it to the mine?" asked Rathburn in surprise. "Hand that over," ordered Sati, reaching for the package. Rathburn drew away. "All right, Mr. Sati," he said in a complaining voice. "If you don't want me to go through with the job, you can back down, I guess. We'll just make sure the money's here, though." Sati leaped towards him. "Give me that package," he cried angrily. "Don't you hear me?" Rathburn warded him off, keeping the package at arm's length away. "Just hold your horses," he said coldly. "I reckon I know what I'm doing. You don't trust me now, and I ain't going to take chances with you. I'm going to open this and show you that the money's there, and that's all. I'm going to show you that I'm giving you back what you gave me all fair and square." Sati's face was ashen. His voice trembled as he spoke again. "Hand it over and get out of here. I've had enough trouble with you. I'll take your word for it." But Rathburn was undoing the paper wrappings. Again Sati made a leap, but this time he met Rathburn's left fist and staggered back, dropping into a chair. And Rathburn looked at him coldly. "Funny, you're so anxious to take my word for things now, when a minute ago you said you couldn't know but what I'd told that hold-up story for a blind so's I could get away with this." The wrapping fell away, revealing a wad of blank paper. Rathburn's face froze. Sati stared white-faced at what the other held in his hand. Then a peculiar glint came into his eyes, and he looked at Rathburn narrowly. "So that's the way of it," he said sarcastically. Rathburn stuffed the paper into a pocket. Then he pulled a chair in front of the mines manager and sat down. He took out paper and tobacco from his shirt pocket and began to fashion a cigarette. "It sure looks bad for me, doesn't it, Mr. Sawtee?" he asked as he snapped a match into a flame. "Well, I thought you were going to return the money," Sawtee said sneeringly. "It looks bad two ways," Rathburn went on as if he hadn't heard the other's comment. "First, if that package the holdups had got had contained the money, you could have swore it was a put-up job. I'd have to beat it fast now when I find out that the package you gave to me was full of blank paper. You can say that I framed the hold-up story and changed the money for paper in the bargain." Satee's eyes were glowing. "And you'll have to beat it after all," he jeered. "So it would seem," mused Rathburn. "I fooled him, and to all appearances I fooled myself. Although maybe I did take a peep into that package when I changed it in my room, Mr. Sawtee." The mines manager shifted in his chair, but he stared defiantly at Rathburn. "You'd have a hard time proving anything," he said grimly. "Well, that's the trouble," Rathburn admitted. I'd sort of have to depend on you. I was thinking, maybe you double-crossed me to make 'em think I was carrying the money while you sneaked it up some other way, Mr. Sawtee." "Well, you can think what you want to," said Sawtee, "but you better start moving. If I was you, I'd get as far away from this town and Mannix as I could by daylight." Rathburn's manner underwent a lightning change as he drew away his partly finished cigarette. "You're right," he said crisply. "It's time to start moving, Sawtee." He rose, and his right hand moved incredibly fast. Sawtee gasped as he looked into the bore of Rathburn's gun. He could hardly realize that Rathburn had drawn. "Now, I fooled the night riders twice," explained Rathburn with a peculiar smile. "First, I let 'em get the wrong package, and again when I let 'em to get the wrong gun. This gun and I work together like a clock ticks when necessary. I'll have to ask you to fork over the money that you drew from the bank and that should have been in the package, Sawtee." Rathburn's eyes had narrowed and hardened. His words were cold and menacing, deadly in their absolute sincerity. What do you mean?" stammered the mines manager. "I take it you're not deaf," snapped out Rathburn. "Maybe you don't know it, Sawtee. You're taking a chance by acting like you didn't get me." Sawtee's thin face was twitching in a spasm of commingled rage and fear. "The Coyote," he breathed. "Who told you that?" demanded Rathburn on the instant. Sawtee gripped the sides of his chair and his face went a shade more pallid. "Carlyle," he confessed in a strained voice. Rathburn laughed and the mines manager shivered as he heard. "Now, Sawtee, we'll quit beating around the bush," Rathburn said through his teeth. "We'll get down to business together or I'll begin to search your place here, but if I have to search, I'm going to search alone. There ain't so much chance of a shot being heard way up the street, and there ain't much chance of me being caught on that hoss of mine if I don't want to get caught. Also, I'm beginning to feel like I was in a hurry. Fork over that money." Sawtee looked just an instant longer into the eyes of the man towering over him, and then he rose, shaking, dry-lipped, and knelt down by the head of his bed. He lifted a piece of the carpet, opened a small trapdoor, reached down inside, and brought out a bundle of banknotes. And Rathburn took the money from him. Sawtee still was kneeling as he heard Rathburn walk lightly to the front door and insert a key in the lock. He tried to cry out, but the effort resulted only a croak in his throat. He heard the door close softly. The Coyote," he mumbled, passing a hand across his forehead. The echo of galloping hoofs came to him as he scrambled to his feet and staggered towards the door. Chapter 20. Appeal to the Law. For some moments, Sawtee stood in the darkened doorway, staring up the moonlit street. The echoes of Rathburn's flight had died away. The town was still. Sati did not cry out, although he was recovered a considerable measure of his composure. He listened intently and finally grunted with satisfaction. Up the road. That means he's making for the pass over the mountains. He walked hurriedly through his office into the living room, and there he stood for a spell beside the table on which burned the lamp. His brows were knit into a heavy frown. He seemed to be debating a question in his mind. He tapped with nervous fingers on the tabletop. Pshaw, he said aloud, face darkening. He's an outlaw. He put on his coat and dropped an automatic pistol into a side pocket. And after another moment of hesitation, he blew out the light and walked quickly out of the place, locking the door after him. He hurried up the street to the jail. He found the jailer dozing in the little front office and did not attempt to disturb him. From the jail, he hurried another short distance up the street and turned in at a little house located some distance back from the sidewalk. He knocked loudly on the door and after a brief wait repeated the performance. A light showed, and the front door opened. Mannix, the deputy, looked out. "Let me in," said Sati briefly. "There's been another robbery." Mannix swung the door open and stepped aside. He wore an ulster over his night clothes, and his bare feet were thrust into slippers. He scowled at the mines manager as he shut the door. "More of the company's money gone?" he asked, with a touch of sarcasm in his voice. "Yeah, some 20-odd thousand," he said soberly, "and I believe the man that's got it is responsible for the hold-ups that have been pulled off around here." "Who got it?" Mannix asked quickly. "Rathburn." Mannix smiled in undisguised contempt. "Your own fault," he pointed out. "Wouldn't give me a chance to investigate. Said you had a scheme that would show him up one way or the other. Wouldn't let me in on it, and I was fool enough to let you have a try. Although I don't believe I could have held him anyhow." "Just in," said Sati. "Wouldn't have done any good to keep him in jail, and I thought I had a two-way scheme that would either show him up, as you say, or get me an excellent messenger. I entrusted Rathburn with a package to carry it to the mines office. Now, he's a gunman, a desperado, probably a killer, and I thought it would appeal to him to be put in a place of trust. If he fell down, then I figure you'd be able to get him like you said you could." Mannix snorted. "After trying a full scheme, you want me to shift the business onto my shoulders? Well, Sati, you've never shown much confidence in my ability. You don't have to show any now. It looks to me as if the finishing of this play is all up to you." "Ah, no, it isn't," said Sati confidently. "You'll be most mightily glad to take out after him." "Well, suppose you wait and see how quick I start," Mannix retorted angrily. "What's the matter? Didn't he carry out your orders? I suppose you gave him a bundle of money to take off with, Sati. I believe you're a fool." The mines manager winced and then frowned. "Oh, I gave him the money to carry to the mine," he confessed without flinching. "He came back with a story about being held up, and when he saw that I didn't believe him and intended to turn him back to you, he pulled a gun on me and made his getaway. He lit out through town for the road to the hogback and pass over the mountains." Mannix laughed harshly. "You're clever, Sati. There's no getting away from how clever you are. Now you want me to go chasing up the hogback and head him off. Well, I'm telling you that I don't know where he's gone, and I ain't starting out after him at any 2 o'clock in the morning. If you'd have kept your nose out of this, he'd still be safe and quiet in jail. And that's final. So you might as well clear out and give me a chance to get some sleep." Sati merely smiled after this speech from the disgusted deputy. "Since I entrusted Rathburn with that job, I've found out something about him which takes the case out of my hands entirely," he says with a smirk. "I don't care if you don't start after him till day after tomorrow. But if your chief, the sheriff, finds out that you didn't hit the trail tonight, he'll likely ask you for your badge." "Are you threatening me?" "No, I'm only stating facts," Sati replied stoutly. "The man who calls himself Rathburn is the Coyote." Mannix didn't start. He appeared hardly interested. Only the keen, penetrating quality of the steady gaze he directed at the mine's manager betrayed the fact that his faculties were aroused. The Coyote hit back for Arizona after that deal he was mixed up in over in Dry Lake, across the range, he says with conviction. Oh, he did? Sati sneered openly. Well, you had him come into jail last night, and you can't probably get him again if you start right out after him. Well, what makes you think this fellow Rathburn is the Coyote? Demanded Mannix. Well, Carlyle knows him by sight, and he told me. Well, then why didn't you tell me? The deputy asked sternly. Because Carlyle didn't tell me until after I told him what I'd done, Sati evaded. Then I didn't have the nerve under the circumstances to come to you with the news. That I thought he might go through with it. Mannix swore softly. Giving a payroll messenger's job to a man who's got a price on his head a mile long? He exclaimed. Why didn't Carlyle come to me? Sati shrugged. I'm not responsible for Carlyle. Maybe he didn't feel sure of it, and maybe he's just naturally jealous of the Coyote and wants me to bring him in myself. Carlyle is a gunman, as you know, and a good one. Well, I know it, snapped out Mannix, and I know both Carlyle and you are a pair of bunglers. I guess you wanted to show me up, but you've gone about it in a way that won't get you anything, nor hurt me. I'll see to that. Sati smiled as the deputy hurried out of the room. In a few minutes, Mannix returned, fully dressed and carrying a rifle. The deputy's face was severe, and his eyes burned with the fire of the manhunt. He signaled impatiently to the mine manager to follow him. As they walked across the little porch and around to the rear of the house where Mannix kept his car, the deputy talked fast. I'm going up the hogback. He ain't had start enough to get up there yet on a horse, and I'll beat him to it. It'll be daylight in about 2 hours, and I'll be there till daylight. If you think you can do it, get out some of the men and cover the trails to the mine on horses. He might try to get over that way. Then you better take your car and go on up to that mine by the road as fast as you can to tell him to be on the lookout. Watch out on the hogbacks, for I'll be up there parked with my lights out. He had reached his small garage when he finished giving his instructions, and Sati, with a promise to do as he had been told as quickly as possible, ran down the street towards the Red Feather, where a light still shone. Now the news that the Coyote and Rathburn were one and the same, and that he had robbed the mining company that night and was probably responsible for the other holdups, created an immediate sensation among the few gamblers in the resort. Sati added to the excitement by quoting rewards at random, and the forming of his two posses to comb the trails to the mine and beyond was underway at once. Sati ran to his office and got out his small car. He stopped at the Red Feather and took one of the men from the mine with him. He stopped again when he reached the Carlyle cabin, pounded on the doors and looked in the windows. The place was deserted, and Sati's features were wreathed in perplexity as he went back to his car. Now that's weird, he says as he climbed into his seat. What's that? Asked the man beside him. But Sati's answer was drowned out in the roar of the motor as he sped up the road towards the hogback and the mine. Chapter 21. A Capture. When Rathburn rode away from Sati's quarters, he galloped up the street straight for the road which led west out of town. He pulled his horse down to a trot when he reached the Carlyle cabin and made another brief inspection which showed that the place was deserted. Then he struck into the trail behind the cabin and began the ascent towards the Dixie Queen. Now, he rode slowly through the timber, dependent upon his mount to keep to the dim trail, but in the open stretches in meadows and on the high crest of ridges where the timber thinned out, he made better time. On this occasion, one would not have noted the attitude of uncertainty about his manner or his movements. He had paid strict attention to the Barnes man's description of this trail, and he had determined general directions the day before. Rathburn was not a stranger to the art of following new trails, nor was he the kind to become confused in a locality which he was not familiar, unless he became absolutely lost. In this instance, it would be a hard matter to become lost, for the ridges rose steadily upward towards the summit of the high mountain. The town was in a narrow valley before, and the foothills ranged down to the desert in the east. He was halfway to the mine when he saw the gleam of an automobile's lights in the road far below. "Well, Sawtee's got busy right quick," he said aloud. "I spect they're hustling up to head me off at the hogback. They're figuring I'd try to go back the way I come in." He smiled grimly in the soft moonlight, and his gaze turned towards the east where the stars glowed over the shadowy reaches of desert, which he could not see, but the very thought of which stirred something in his soul. Then he pushed on up the trail towards the mine. For more than an hour he rode, and then when he came to the crest of a ridge just below the Dixie Queen, he saw the lights of an automobile in the road to the right of him. "Now what?" he ejaculated. "They ain't figuring I'd come up here." He sat his horse with features again wreathed in perplexity. He scowled at the approaching gleam of light. In the direction of the hogback he could see nothing, nor could he see the horsemen already on the trail below him and on the ridge trail to the east. The little mine village was directly below him. The few buildings huddled together below the big mine dump were dark. The mine buildings, too, were dark. A faint glow showed in the east, harbinger of the dawn. The left side of the automobile was toward him when it stopped in the little street below. A man climbed out and walked around in front of the car, and Rathburn grunted in recognition as he made out the familiar form of Sawtee, the mine manager. He saw Sawtee and another leave the car and walk towards a building at the lower end of the street. He could see them fairly well in the moonlight. He realized that in a comparatively short time it would be daylight. He turned his horse down the slope. When he reached the rear of the few buildings which formed the mining village, catering to the wants of the Dixie Queen workers, Rathburn edged along to the lower end where he left his horse in the shadow of a building directly across from the one which Sawtee and his companion had entered, and in the windows of which a light now shone. He stole across the street, and peering in one of the windows he saw the room was an office. Sawtee was standing before a desk, talking to another man. Rathburn quickly surmised that this man had accompanied Sawtee from the town. Even as he looked, Sawtee finished his speech by striking a palm with his fist, and his companion strode towards a door. Rathburn darted around the side of the building into the shadow as the man came out, and hurried up a wide road toward the mining buildings above. Then Rathburn ran around to the front of the building and quietly opened the door. Sawtee had seated himself at the desk, and he swung about in his chair as he heard the door open. He looked again into the black bore of Rathburn's gun. His eyes bulged, and this time they shone with genuine terror. "It was sure in the pictures for us to meet again, Sawtee," said Rathburn easily. "Our business wasn't finished. We ain't through yet." "There isn't any more money," Sawtee gasped out. "There's no money up here at all." "Oh, yes, there is," said Rathburn with a mirthless smile. "There's $20,000 odd in my right-hand coat pocket. Now I wonder what you've got in yours. It don't stand to reason you'd start out this time without a gun. Stand up." Sawtee rose. His face was ashen. He held his hands high as Rathburn pressed his weapon against his chest and relieved him of the automatic which he carried. Rathburn felt his other pockets and then smiled agreeably. He tossed the automatic onto the desk. "All right, we'll get going," he announced, indicating the open door. "We'll have to hurry, for I take it you sent for somebody from the mine." "Where are we going?" asked Sawtee without moving. "Well, we're going for a little morning walk, if you act reasonable," replied Rathburn. "That was my intention. But if you don't want to go—" He shrugged, and as Sawtee looked fixedly at him, he cocked his gun. Sawtee hurried towards the door, with Rathburn following him closely. When they were outside, Rathburn directed Sawtee across the street. When they reached Rathburn's horse, Rathburn quickly mounted and motioned to the mines manager to precede him into the timber behind the little village. When they gained the shelter of the timber, he gradually circled around till they struck a trail which led up above the mine. They started up this, Sawtee leading the way on foot, with Rathburn following on his horse and keeping his gun trained on the mines manager's back. "Don't worry," Rathburn crooned. "I won't shoot you in the back, Sawtee. That wouldn't be according to my ethics. But if I have to stop you if you made a break to leave the present company..." Sawtee plodded on, his breath coming in gasps, the perspiration standing out on his forehead. The trail joined with another well-worn path a short distance above the mine. The eastern sky now was light, and Rathburn saw a stone building above him. He also saw that they were on the steep slope of the big mountain on which the Dixie Queen was located, and that there was a rift in this mountain to the left which indicated the presence of a pass there. In a few minutes they reached the stone building. It had an iron door across which was painted the legend, "Danger, powder, dynamite, keep away." Rathburn dismounted and tossed his reins over his horse's head so the animal would stand. "Well, that place looks like a natural jail," he commented. "It's the mine's powder house," said Sawtee, wiping his wet forehead. "Sure," Rathburn joined. "That's just what it is. I expect there's enough powder in there to blow half this mountain off." He walked to the door and took out his gun as he examined the padlock. "Well, what are you going to do?" asked Sawtee excitedly. "I'm going to blow the lock off," said Rathburn coolly. "Don't do it," cried Sawtee. "There's high-percentage dynamite in there and TNT caps that we use on road work, dozens of boxes of it. You might set it off." Rathburn looked at the quaking mine manager speculatively. "That's right," he said, finally turning aside to grin to himself. "I guess any little jar might start it working. It goes off easy, I've heard." "There are caps and detonators in there, too," said Sawtee quickly. "You might shoot into them some way. You never can tell." "Well, it would be as bad for you as for me." He uttered the last sentence in a note of triumph. Rathburn was looking at the far-flung view below. He turned a hard gaze on Sawtee. "Now what difference do you suppose it would make to me if that stuff in there goes off?" he demanded in a harsh voice. "Look down there." Sawtee looked and drew in his air with a gasp. In the clear light of the blossoming dawn, the whole panorama of the lower mountain country had spread out before them. To the left, under the towering peaks of the divide, the rounded crest of the hogback was discernible, and the black spot marked the location of Mannix's automobile. "See, there's a car over there," said Rathburn, noting the direction of Sawtee's gaze. Almost directly below them, a number of mounted men filed over a ridge and again disappeared into the timber. And off to the right, more horsemen were to be seen. "Looks like there was a posse or two out this morning," said Rathburn in a forbidding voice. "I reckon I ain't such a fool as not to know who they're looking for, Sawtee. Now, maybe you can figure out why I ain't as scared of that powder house as you are." "I can stop 'em," cried Sawtee in a shaken voice. "Sure," Rathburn agreed. "You can say you lied about me taking the money." "I'll tell 'em you give it back," said Sawtee hoarsely. "I'll tell 'em you brought it up on the mine and that it's in the safe. I'll square it." "But you can't square the rewards that are out for the Coyote," said Rathburn sternly. "You've stepped into a bigger game than you thought, Sawtee, and it's gotten plumb out of your hands." He turned on the mine manager fiercely. "Whatever happens here, remember this. Once a man gets a bad reputation in a country like this, or the country I come from, he's got it for keeps. He can't get away with it no matter how he acts or what he does. Mine has drove me away from the place where I belong. It has followed me here. I can't lose it. And the way things have been going, by glory, I don't know if I want to lose it." Sawtee cowered back under the fierceness in Rathburn's manner. "And you can tell 'em, if you ever have a chance to talk again, that I earned my reputation square. I ain't involved nobody else, and I ain't stole from any poor people. And I never drew my gun down on a man who didn't start for his first." The deadly earnestness and the note of regret in Rathburn's tone caused Sawtee to forget his uneasiness, temporarily, and stare at the man in wonder. Rathburn's eyes were narrowed and his gaze was steel blue and his face was drawn into hard, grim lines as he looked out upon the far-flung, glorious vistas below him, broken here and there by the movements of mounted men. Maybe, Sati faltered in his speech. His words seemed impotent in the face of Rathburn's deadly seriousness. Rathburn turned abruptly to the powder house door. "Wait!" cried Sati. The mines manager dug frantically into his pocket and drew out a bunch of keys. "There are some locks on this property to which there are only 2 keys, he explained nervously. "And this is one of them. And I carry the second key. Here." He held out the key ring with 1 key extended. Rathburn thrust his gun back into its holster and took the keys. In a moment he had unlocked the padlock and swung open the iron door, exposing case after case of high explosive within that stone structure. Sati was staring at him in dire apprehension. Rathburn pointed towards the rift in the mountain on the left above him. Sati looked and saw a man and a boy riding down the trail. "Why, that looks to me like the man that held me up last night," said Rathburn. "He looked like one of the men anyway. Maybe he's found out he didn't get much, huh? Maybe he's coming back because he didn't have enough to make a getaway with. Maybe he thinks he was double-crossed or something." Sati's features were working in a spasm of fear and worry. Suddenly he turned on Rathburn. "Why don't you get away?" he asked in eager pleading. "That trail will take you out of the mountains and down into the desert country. You're from the desert, aren't you? You can make it. You've got a good haul. Go. It'll be better for me and all of us." Rathburn laughed bitterly. "I can't go because I'm the worse fool than you are," he said acridly. "Get in there, you sneaking lizard. Man, can't you see I'm tempted to put a shot into one of them boxes and blow us both to kingdom come?" Sati shrunk back into the powder house, and Rathburn slammed the door. As Rathburn snapped the padlock and thrust the keys into his pocket, his eyes again sought the trail to the left above him. No one was in sight. The man and the boy had disappeared in a bend or a depression in the trail. But when he looked down towards the hogback, he saw a car coming up the road towards the mine, and a number of horsemen had taken its place on the hogback. Rathburn ran for his horse. Well, folks, there's another little bit of that story. It's getting a little interesting. I wonder if that mines manager is going to get found out by the crowd. How's this going to play out? Well, we'll both find out next time we get here around this campfire, telling stories and enjoying company. Sounds like a good time, doesn't it? Well, it usually is. Come on back and we'll find out. Now, till I see you next time around the campfire, this is Clay Steele. Good night. Hey folks, Clay Steele here. You know, I spend a lot of time outdoors around this here campfire. If you're like me, you get downright annoyed by all those pesky mosquitoes buzzing around. They're just looking for a free meal. Nothing ruins a good night under the stars faster than slapping and scratching at bites. And that's why I keep the bee itch stop. I keep it handy. One swipe and that itch is gone. No more burning, no more scratching, just good old relief. Made right here in Nevada with all natural ingredients. It's safe for the whole family. So if you're tired of being a mosquito buffet, do yourself a favor and get you some bee itch stop today. And this is Clay Steele. Watch out for them bugs.